Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has urged the leaders of Muslim states to act collectively to counter Islamophobia. In a letter to Muslim leaders, Khan said Islamophobia in West is causing widespread concern amongst the Muslims. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Western countries are attacking Islam in a bid to relaunch the Crusades. Azerbaijan says 20 people have been killed and over 40 wounded in an Armenian missile attack near the Nagorno-Karabakh front line. The Armenian Defense Ministry has denied the report as fake. Over 1,000 people, mostly soldiers, have been killed since the fighting broke out on the 27th of September. In occupied Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred 2 more Kashmiris during a military raid in the Baghdad district. This has raised the death toll from fake encounters by Indian forces to 20 this month. The region has been under a curfew and communications blackout since India revoked its autonomy last year. The global number of COVID-19 infections has topped 44 million with more than 1.16 million deaths. The US is the worst hit country, followed by India and Brazil. Pakistan's caseload has topped 330,000, while the death toll stands at 6,759. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has urged the leaders of Muslim states to act collectively to counter Islamophobia. In a letter to Muslim leaders, Khan said Islamophobia in West is causing widespread concern amongst the Muslims. More details in this report.
The Prime Minister said incidents of desecration of the Holy Quran and the publication of blasphemous cartoons are a reflection of rising Islamophobia in Europe. He went on to say that mosques are being closed and Muslims are being marginalized. This, he said, is giving rise to radicalization and creating increasing space for extremists on all sides. The issue surfaced earlier this month following the beheading of a teacher in France who showed blasphemous cartoons to his pupils. France's President Emmanuel Macron honored the teacher and pledged to introduce measures that largely target Muslims. His statement drew widespread criticism from the Muslim world, with Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, and Bangladesh condemning the offensive caricatures and attempts to link Islam with terrorism. France has Western Europe's largest Muslim population, and some accuse the authorities of using secularism to target them.
Now moving on, in France, a mosque located in Vernon district has received a note containing death threats and insults. The note says the war has begun and all Muslims will be driven out of France soon. The notice left in the mosque mailbox also contained disrespectful remarks against Muslim women who do headscarves. A wave of Islamophobia has been stirred in France following President Emmanuel Macron's remarks against Islam. Several Muslim countries, including Pakistan, Turkey, and Iran, have lodged protests over the French president's comments. Azerbaijan says 20 people have been killed and over 40 wounded in an Armenian missile attack near the Nagorno-Karabakh front line, but Armenian Defense Ministry denied the report as fake. The renewed fighting over the disputed region has prompted world powers to wade into the conflict. On Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo urged both sides to abide by a ceasefire reached earlier this month. But both sides have accused each other of violating the truce. Over 1,000 people, mostly soldiers, have been killed since the fighting broke out on the 27th of September. The region is internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan but controlled by ethnic Armenians. Indian troops have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Kashmir. The youths were targeted during a military raid in the Baghdad district. A cordon search operation was continuing by the troops in Machowa area of the district till last reports came in. The Indian forces have martyred 20 Kashmiris this month alone, while 40 people were wounded due to an indiscriminate use of live ammunition and pellet guns by the occupation forces. The occupied valley has been under a curfew since India revoked its autonomy in August last year. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad will continue to facilitate the Afghan peace process. He said this during a telephonic conversation with his Afghan counterpart Mohammad Hanif Atmar. Qureshi said intra-Afghan talks have provided a historic opportunity for peace, which the Afghan leadership must capitalize on. He added that Pakistan has introduced a new visa policy to facilitate the travel of Afghan people. Meanwhile, in a meeting in Islamabad, officials from both the countries agreed to resolve issues related to bilateral trade. This comes as the Afghan government and the Taliban are engaged in talks in Doha to end the decades-long war. But a UN report said violence has increased in recent months despite the ongoing peace efforts. The International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran has started building an underground centrifuge assembly plant. In an interview, agency head Rafael Grossi said Iran continues to stockpile greater amounts of low-enriched uranium. In July, the Natanz nuclear site would explode in what Tehran called a sabotage attack. Under a 2015 nuclear deal, Iran is allowed to produce a certain amount of enriched uranium for non-military purposes, but it has been steadily exceeding the deal's limits after the U.S. unilaterally left the agreement in 2018. Lebanon and Israel have launched the second round of U.S. brokered talks over the disputed sea border. Israel's energy ministry says the delegations met a UN peacekeeper base. It said they will assess the possibility of an agreement to enable the cultivation of natural resources in the area. The disputed area, known as Zone Number 9, is rich with oil and gas. The first round of U.S. arbitrated talks held on October 14th ended inconclusively. Another round is expected on Thursday. In Thailand, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has refused to resign despite mass protests. Speaking in the parliament, the Prime Minister said he will not run away from the problems. Chan-o-cha described the protests as illegal and ordered a stricter action against them. The Prime Minister accused some protesters of aggravated assault and violence and called for an end to riots. Opposition members told Prayut to stop hiding behind proclamations of loyalty to the monarchy and step down. Meanwhile, protest leaders have dismissed the 2-day parliamentary session as useless. The protests in Thailand have intensified a year after courts banned a political party opposing the government of Chan-o-cha. Over 70 million Americans have cast their ballots ahead of the U.S. presidential election November 3rd. The U.S. Elections Project says the number represents more than half of the total turnout of the 2016 election. With just a week to go, the race for the White House is now in the top gear. Both President Donald Trump and Democrat nominee Joe Biden continues to spar over the handling COVID-19 pandemic. At a campaign rally in Wisconsin, Trump claimed the number of infections and hospitalizations are down. Addressing a drive-in event in Atlanta, Georgia, Democratic candidate Joe Biden said Trump had abandoned American families and surrendered to the pandemic. Biden said Trump has failed to recognize the problem of systematic racism in the country.
The only thing that can tear America apart is America itself. No other nation can do it. Only America can tear America apart. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. Let's show them who we are. We choose hope over fear, unity over division, science over fiction, and yes, truth over lies.
Polling has begun in India's second most populous state of Bihar in the first major election since the COVID-19 outbreak started in the country. New Delhi is going ahead with the vote despite India being the second worst hit country by the pandemic. With 243 seats up for the grabs. The vote is being seen as a referendum on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's handling of COVID-19. The BJP has ruled the state for over a decade in alliance with the regional party, the Janata Dal, but it is yet to win Bihar on its own. Despite 2 successive federal wins since 2014, Modi has lost a whopping 6 state elections. Polling will conclude in 3 phases and the vote will be counted on the 10th of November. Tanzanians are voting today to elect a new president and parliament. Over 29 million people are registered to vote to decide the fate of President John, who seeks re-election. Voters will choose from 15 presidential candidates and elect lawmakers for 264 parliamentary seats. Under Tanzania's electoral rules, the winning candidate requires a simple majority to become president. Violence broke out ahead of the vote, with the police being accused of killing 9 people in the semi-autonomous region of Zanzibar. Opposition has also accused the government supporters of shooting dead 2 people at an election rally. The global number of COVID-19 infections has topped 44 million, with more than 1.16 million deaths. The U.S. is the worst-hit country with 8.7 million cases, followed by India with almost 8 million infections. More details in this report.
The surging second wave of COVID-19 has forced countries to reconsider nationwide lockdowns. Number of cases in Latin American countries of Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico are spiking at an unprecedented rate. The outbreak in the U.S. is more aggressive than ever, with the country reporting a record of more than 500,000 new cases over the past week. But President Donald Trump says the reports of the spread of the virus in the U.S. is a Democratic election campaign gimmick.
And we had a spike in Miami, we had a spike in Texas, Arizona. It's all way down to very low numbers. But I'll tell you, all they want to talk about is COVID. But the good news, on the 4th, they'll stop talking. You watch. They'll stop talking. You get out, that red wave, just get out. We have to win this election.
Over the past week, Europe has accounted for the greatest proportion of all new cases in the world and 1/3 of all deaths. While Britain struggles to contain the outbreak despite new policies, UK Vaccines Task Force has classified the first generation of COVID-19 vaccines being produced by Russia and other countries as imperfect and risky. The French government is mulling month-long national lockdown as country's hospitals hit record saturation in 2 weeks.
Parce qu'on sait ce qu'on a vécu.
We know what we went through last time. During the first wave, we were in it, we didn't know what to expect. But now we do know what to expect, and we are even nervous that it could be worse. Because unfortunately, with everything we are seeing in the streets, everything we are hearing, it is tough.
Meanwhile, China has reported 42 new infections in the last 24 hours. This is the country's highest daily toll in more than 2 months due to a rise in the cases in the northwestern Xinjiang region.
In Pakistan, 14 more people have died of coronavirus overnight, raising the death toll to 6,759. The Health Ministry says 825 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. The ministry said there are over 11,500 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 330,000 countrywide patients, more than 311,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 144,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 103,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, more than 90,000 have been infected so far. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay tuned. And now moving on, in Philippines, strong winds and rains from Typhoon MOLAVE have left 9 people dead and several others injured. Officials say the storm has so far displaced 210,000 residents. MOLAVE is the 17th tropical cyclone battering the Southeast Asian country this year. Over in Vietnam, 2 people died and 26 fishermen went fishing after the typhoon lashed the country's central coastline. Authorities have evacuated hundreds of thousands of people from the path of the storm. Vietnam has seen 9 storms this year. Tropical storm ZETA is heading towards the U.S. Gulf Coast after slamming Mexico overnight. Quintana Roo Governor Carlos Joaquin says the storm did not cause any serious damage. ZETA made landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula north of Tulum, Mexico as a Category 1 hurricane. Quintana Roo State Governor Gonzalez said the hurricane did not inflict any serious damage. Gonzalez said a couple of airports have resumed regular operations.
We have to clean our streets again. We have to get our energy systems, potable water, and public services back up where they're lacking so that we can get them back up today or at least tomorrow. We hope it turns out that way and we keep moving our economic recovery forward.
Authorities say ZETA has moved back to the sea towards the U.S. coast. 2 firefighters have been injured and over 80,000 homes evacuated as Silverado fire rips through Southern California. The U.S. state endured a second straight day of power shutoffs as winds whip up to the blaze. California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection says Silverado has spread to about over 13,000 acres so far. It said about 750 firefighters using 14 helicopters have managed to control 5% of the fire. No casualties have been reported so far. Over 4 million acres have been scorched in the U.S. this year, along with thousands of homes destroyed and 31 lives lost. 4 people have died after a boat carrying some 20 migrants capsized off the coast of Lune Plague in northern France. Authorities say 15 people have been rescued, with 8 suffering from hypothermia, while 2 in cardiac arrest. They say rescue operation is underway for a missing migrant. Several thousand migrants have attempted the dangerous crossing of the English Channel this year. Colombia's Navy has seized 2 tons of cocaine that was being transported inside a semi-submersible sea vessel. Navy says 3 suspects belonging to Colombia, Ecuador, and Mexico were arrested. Officials say the submarine was escorted by the Navy to a port at Tumaco in southwestern Colombia. The anti-narcotics officials estimate the drugs valued over $18.6 million. The shipment was headed to the Jalisco New Generation cartel, Mexico. A larger-than-life sculpture by Swiss artist Alberto Giacometti is up for sale at Sotheby's in New York. Valued at over $90 million, Grand Femme 1 is being sold by an online sealed bidding strategy. More details in this report.
Swiss-born Giacometti is one of the best sculptors of the 20th century. Grand Femme 1 is one of 4 sculptures Giacometti conceived and cast in 1960. They were originally to be installed in Chase Plaza in Manhattan, but the installation never happened. Monumental sculpture could very well sell for more than $100 million, as Giacomotti's work regularly breaks auction records. His Pointing Man was sold for $141 million in New York in 2015, the largest sum ever for a sculpture at an auction. Sotheby's has also displayed their upcoming Impressionist, Modern, and Contemporary art evening sales. Among the highlights of that sale are Mark Rothko's painting Untitled Black on Maroon and a Vincent van Gogh floral painting called Fleurs d'un Verre.
Mexicans are honoring health workers battling COVID-19 on the Day of the Dead this year. More than this report.
The Day of the Dead is a pre-Hispanic tradition in which families remember their dead and celebrate the continuity of life. As the world deals with the virus that risks bringing death to everyone's door, Mexico City's Museo del Carmen opens its doors with this day's offering dedicated to the health workers on the front line of the battle against the coronavirus pandemic.
These souls help the sun to set and go through the underworld to come out again. And here we show they had certain characteristics. The deceased became small hummingbirds who returned to Earth. And it was as though they returned and they could see the flowers, and people knew they were dead who had come back to life in some way.
The pandemic still afflicting much of the country, celebrations this year are a little more somber. Rather than the usual social gatherings and events, residents can explore the museum's offering at a responsible distance.
We needed spaces like this, keeping a safe distance, following protocols, so that we are able to visit and relive some of the experiences we had every year on the Day of the Dead.
Mexico's Day of the Dead celebrations are considered a cultural heritage by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization.
European stocks have fallen sharply as new restrictions in the region sink hopes of economic recovery. The spread of COVID-19 continues across the continent while U.S. election uncertainty compounds risk of sentiment. Frankfurt's DAX and the CAC 40 in Paris have plummeted over 3%. The pan-European stock 600 shed over 2%, with travel and leisure stocks falling. London's FTSE plunged nearly 2%, while Italy's FTSE MIB dived over 3.5%. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed. Japanese stocks and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index shed, while South Korean, Australian and mainland Chinese bourses edged up. In the UEFA Champions League, Manchester United beat Olympique Marseille by 3-0 in their Group C clash. Ferran Torres, Laike Gondlin and Raheem Sterling were on target as Pep Guardiola's men stayed top of the standings. In the other Group C match, the Portuguese giants FC Porto beat Olympiacos by 2-0 at the Estadio do Dragão. In a Group A, holders Bayern Munich edged host Lokomotiv Moscow by 2-1, while Atletico Madrid fought back to beat Red Bull Salzburg by 3-2. In Group B, 13-time winners Real Madrid snatched a late-2-all draw at Borussia Mönchengladbach, and Inter Milan and Shakhtar Donetsk played out a goalless draw in Kyiv. The 2019 champions Liverpool labored to a 2-0 home win in Group D, while Atlanta overcame a 2-goal deficit to earn a 2-all draw at Ajax. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. And for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.